Let's begin.
Scary Story Fanatics. Welcome back to Keeping Thought from the Bone. Finally, with your host, Sociopathic. I'm very happy to return and spend this Saturday evening with you. So to kick things back off, I'd like to tell you a little story that the deep web is less a place and more a smell. It's the scent of ozone, stale air, and something rotting behind a dry wall that you can't reach. Arthur knew the legends of Sad Satan. He knew the curated creepypasta history, the flickering black and white hallways, the slowed down loops of Led Zeppelin, the grainy photos of dead royalty and long gone killers. It was supposed to be a walking simulator for the masochistic, a digital purgatory where the only goal was to keep moving until the file corrupted itself. He downloaded the clean version first. Then, driven by a completionist's itch that felt more like a low-grade fever, he hunted for the original, true version. The monitor cast a jaundiced glow over Arthur's cramped studio apartment. When the game launched, there was no menu, no options, just a screen of jagged, monochromatic static that sounded like teeth grinding together. Arthur pressed W. His avatar moved through a hallway that seemed to be made of compressed charcoal. The perspective was fish-eyed, warping the edges of the screen so that the walls appeared to breathe. Crunch. Crunch. The footsteps in the game were too loud. They weren't the sound of boots on stone. They were the sound of boots on dry bone. Arthur lowered the volume, but the sound didn't change. In fact, it seemed to resonate from the floorboards beneath his own desk. "Great," Arthur whispered, his voice sounding thin. Immersion. He played for 3 hours. The game was a loop of senselessness. He passed a grainy, digitized image of a child standing in a field. The child's eyes were black pits. When Arthur turned the camera back, the image was gone. Then came the first bleed. Arthur paused the game to get a glass of water. As he stood up, he noticed his shadow on the wall. It wasn't moving with him. For a fraction of a second, his shadow remained seated at the desk, its neck craned at a sharp, impossible angle toward the monitor. And by the time he blinked, it had snapped back into place. By the second night, the game had changed. The hallways were no longer digital renders. They looked like scanned photographs of a basement that Arthur recognized. The peeling wallpaper, the specific shade of water-damaged ochre. It was his childhood home in Ohio. Arthur found a note in the game. "The door is locked from the outside. You are the one who turned the key." Arthur's hands shook on the keyboard. "How does it have these assets?" he muttered. He checked the file size, and it was growing. 12 gigabytes, 40 gigabytes, 120 gigabytes. It was consuming his hard drive, eating space like a digital cancer. The audio began to distort. It wasn't just white noise anymore. It was a voice, low, guttural, and rhythmic. It was reciting his social security number, and then his mother's maiden name, and then the exact time he had fallen off his bike when he was 8 years old. He tried to Alt F4, and the screen flickered, but the game remained. He tried to unplug the monitor. The screen stayed lit, powered by some phantom current. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The footsteps were in the hallway of his apartment now. Arthur turned around. His front door was closed, bolted with the heavy deadbolt he'd installed after the break-in last year. But on the floor, sliding out from under the crack of the door, was a thick, black liquid. It looked like the textures from the game, low resolution, flickering, pixelated oil. On the third night, he would experience total disillusion. Arthur hadn't slept. His eyes were shot through with broken capillaries, making the world look as red and raw as the game's later levels. He was no longer playing the game. The game was playing him. He sat motionless, his fingers fused to the WASD keys. On the screen, the avatar was standing in a room filled with static. In the center of the room was a mirror. Arthur moved the mouse to make the avatar look into the mirror. The face that looked back wasn't a character model. It was a live feed of him. But it was Arthur 3 minutes from now. In the reflection, his throat was already slit, a digital gash of red pixels spilling down a sweater he wasn't yet wearing. "I'm losing it," he sobbed. "It's a psychotropic effect, sensory deprivation, the frequencies." He looked at his hands. They were turning gray. His skin was becoming dithered, breaking apart into tiny square pixels. He tried to scream, but the sound that came out was a 4-bit audio file of a child screaming, looped and slowed down by like 800%. The apartment was dissolving. The couch was losing its geometry, collapsing into basic polygons. The smell of the deep web, that rotting ozone, was now so thick he could taste it. He ran for the door, but the hallway of his apartment had stretched. It was now a mile long, a monochrome corridor of flickering light. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Something was behind him. He didn't want to look, but the mouse of his mind forced his head to turn. It was the Satan of the game's title. It wasn't a demon or a monster. It was a tall, featureless man wearing a suit made of corrupted data. Where a face should have been, there was only a progress bar. 98% complete. Arthur fell to his knees. The floor felt like cold glass. He looked at his computer desk, which was now miles away at the end of an impossible hallway. He could see himself sitting there. He could see his own back. I'm the character, Arthur realized, the thought appearing as a line of dialogue at the bottom of his vision. not the player. I never was. He watched as the version of himself at the desk, the real Arthur, stretched his arms, yawned, and finally managed to close the program. The screen went black. Arthur was plunged into a void. Total silence. No light, no sound, no texture. Just the terrifying vacuum of a deleted file. And then, a flicker. He felt a hand on his shoulder. It was warm, human. Arthur? Honey, wake up. You fell asleep at the computer again. Arthur opened his eyes. He was in a bright suburban kitchen. The sun was streaming through the windows. The smell of bacon and coffee replaced the ozone. His wife, Sarah, was standing over him, smiling. You in those horror games, she chuckled, kissing his forehead. You were moaning in your sleep. Something about pixels? Arthur breathed a sigh of relief so deep it hurt his ribs. It was a dream. A vivid, tech-induced nightmare brought on by too much caffeine and a creepy aesthetic. Yeah, he rasped. Yeah, just a bad game. Sarah, I'm done with that stuff. He stood up, his joints popping. He felt heavy, real. He looked down at his coffee mug. It was ceramic. It was solid. He looked at his hands. They were flesh and bone. I'm gonna go jump in the shower, Arthur said, feeling a surge of gratitude for the mundane world. He walked into the bathroom and turned on the light. He stripped off his shirt and stepped toward the mirror to shave. He picked up the razor, and he looked at his reflection. He looked normal, but then he noticed something on the vanity, a small black USB drive that he did not recognize. He picked it up. Written on the side in Sharpie was a single word. Source. Sarah? He called out. Where did this come from? No answer. Sarah? He walked back into the kitchen. Sarah was standing by the stove, but she wasn't moving. She was frozen in mid-pour. The coffee suspended in the air like a brown plastic sculpture. The steam from the pan was a jagged, unmoving shape. Arthur's heart hammered against his ribs. He ran to the window and pulled back the curtain. Outside, there was no suburb. There was no sun. Beyond the glass was a vast, infinite grid of glowing blue lines. Giant, translucent numbers floated in the sky, scrolling upward at terrifying speeds. In the distance, he saw the massive, looming shapes of other assets. A house identical to his, a car, a tree, all waiting in a gray void to be loaded into a scene. He looked back at the USB drive in his hand, and he turned it over. On the back was a small LCD display he hadn't noticed before. It wasn't a USB drive at all. It was a counter. Players Online 1. A voice boomed from the sky, a voice that sounded like 1,000 mechanical fans spinning at once. Trial period expired. Purchase full version to continue Reality.exe. Arthur looked at his wife. A small X appeared in the corner where she was. He looked at his hands. They weren't turning into pixels this time. They were simply becoming transparent. He wasn't the character in the game called Sad Satan. He was the file being used to test it. The clean version of the world flickered. The sun turned back into a jaundiced monitor glow. The smell of bacon turned back into rotting ozone. And then, a cursor appeared in the sky. It moved with agonizing slowness toward the delete icon in the corner of the universe. Arthur screamed, but the audio was muted. Emptying trash. The kitchen vanished. Sarah vanished. The light vanished. In the dark, the only thing left was the sound of footsteps. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Someone else had just started a new game.
Well, if you feel like you're starring as Player One in the game of your own life, you're probably right. But you won't be wrong if you stop by again here next Saturday for more gore galore as well. And until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.
Social media can be very unpredictable, especially regarding horror content. If this content gets removed, all new content will be simultaneously presented on various websites provided in the description to this video. Make sure to follow me in other digital spaces so that you never miss out on the terror. Also, if you like this video, make sure to leave a comment and hit the like button. It helps the channel a lot. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy what's here, consider hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you never miss an upload. Writing is a dream of mine, and it's all of you that make that dream come true.